Hello, all. Good morning. I am recording this on a Friday morning. So on a Friday morning. I don't even know what day it is. On a Saturday morning. So happy Saturday. I hope you all are having a good weekend so far. Um, I'm going to share my screen here and get started. So, this week we read Ernest Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. We've also listened to music from King Oliver, Bunk Johnson, Louis Armstrong, some more Jelly Roll, Morton, and Ma Rainey. I will say, just as a personal note, I've had an extensive musical memory of Bessie Smith without actually like knowing any names of songs or anything about her. My grandma would listen to records anytime she was getting ready for a night out. And I really didn't realize how old or the era this music was from until this week. So thanks for the trip down memory lane. I've kind of been contemplating how to attack this project. I know my paper will address the work, and I'm sure most of us are well acquainted with Hemingway. However, I am going to do just a rundown on him, his writings as a refresher. After that, I'm also going to discuss the cultural context that spurred his writing along. And I know this is an American lit class, but it doesn't feel right for me to stay in America when we're dealing with expats. So I'm going to do a little bit and kind of go a little bit into the surroundings of Hemingway, at least at the time, and where we physically go during this, where when we're reading The Sun Also Rises. Don't worry though, I'm going to bring us right back, ending in New Orleans and the age of jazz. I'm going to try not to repeat too much of what was already given to us in the week's description. I'm going to be touching more on his life than his writing style. Hemingway was born in Chicago, and after he finished high school, he decided to skip out on college and moved to Kansas City, where he began a career as a reporter for the Star. Something crucial to know about Hemingway is that he believed in the macho man, very stereotypical macho man. He was a hunter, he was a fisher, he was an athlete and a boxer. He even competed in amateur bullfights later on. I bring this up because he attempted to join the military but was rejected because he had a defective eye. At this point in America, we still had the sentiment of honor and glory because we have to think this is, pre World War One. So we had that feeling of duty associated with serving one's country. Once World War One hit, he actually was able to fulfill his patriotic and civic duties as an ambulance driver for the Red Cross. He was injured in Italy, and because of this event in his life, it's hard for me to read A Farewell to Arms without thinking or feeling that Frederick is very loosely autobiographically based. Um, he also fell in love, he, meaning Hemingway, also fell in love with a nurse, much like Frederick. The nurse rejected Hemingway, however, in the novel. Fair warning, spoiler alert, if you haven't read the novel, if you want to read the novel, if you don't want to know the ending of the novel, mute me out for 10 seconds. But instead of the protagonist being rejected, he simply just kills off Cat. And I'm continually battling the way I feel about how Hemingway writes women, but I digress. He eventually finds himself in France as a reporter for the Toronto Star. And while he was in France, he began writing non journalistic works under the encouragement and advice of American writers like Ezra Pound, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and of course, we can't leave out the person who coined the Lost Generation, Gertrude Stein. The Sun Also Rises. Oh, hold on. Sorry. So this is just a little blurb of, or an image of the Toronto Daily Star. And it doesn't have anything to do with Hemingway, but it is from the 1920s. So I thought it'd be interesting just to see, what he was working on at the time. But The Sun Also Rises appears to be Hemingway's first big success. Scholar Angela O'Donnell discusses how he simultaneously craved and resented the limelight, which for me, it doesn't make sense. I always feel like if you're going to be the type of person that's like, oh, I love the work, but not the business. So don't put your work in the business. You know, you can very well choose to write for yourself or write for your friends and not be involved in the limelight. But I am not famous. I will probably never be famous. So I guess I can't really speak to that experience. I looked up images on the Lost Generation. I really don't know who any of these are. Other of you might, and that's awesome. I only noticed it because Ernest Hemingway is right there on the right. But so this is kind of what you would see, you know, they're sitting around, they're having coffee or they're having cocktails and they'll just be discussing their thoughts and ideas, their work. And I always think that's really cool. And I'm going to throw this one in because despite any feelings we may or may not have, he is sure a handsome man. I always think this picture is so nice of him. Just to give us a little bit of background on The Sun Also Rises, or not background, but kind of a more in-depth look at The Sun Also Rises, I found a trailer. And so it's pretty low quality. I'm going to try and keep it in the small scale so that hopefully the quality is not that horrible or translated that horribly. But this just kind of gives us a physical look of what whoever directed this movie thought that, you know, Jake Barnes looked like or any of the other characters. So hopefully you'll like it. Let me try and I'm not very tech savvy. You're going to have to bear with me here as I convert screens. All right. Hopefully this comes through loud and clear. All right, so that's basically that. Filled with lots of action, exciting fight scenes. The bull scene is a little bit anticlimactic. I do believe he just kind of twirls around with his red thing, and the bull is looking very sedated. A lot of time, I feel like, in that 3-minute trailer, good portion of it was spent on Hemingway's impotence. So that clearly is a very important part to this story. Um, but we're going to go ahead and move on and just wonder why everyone's jumping ship. So basically, in the first big wave of immigration to Europe, it took place in the 1920s. America really struggled after World War II. And I know we think of the 1920s as the golden age, but it would be good for us to remember that not everyone lived in Gatsby's world. Americans began seeing America as a place of suppression more than the land of opportunity. And while it is true that in America, wealth and new money was making, strides, those spurts of growth were straddled on the backs of the laborers. So it's not exactly just like everybody's rolling in the dough. American writers really began to feel that oppressive, lackluster, dulling nature of industrialism, and they fled America to break the Puritan shackles, drink, live freely, and be wholly creative, end quote. I really think that they were going abroad to look for wisdom in lands who housed older cultures than our American culture. They really anticipated that European urban cities would be more intellectually advanced than we were at the time. And of course, we can't forget that post-war economic depression took place in Europe. So that allowed people that had American money to go live much wealthier lives in European countries than they would have been able to have in the States. So while pull factors were bringing Black Americans to the North, push factors were beckoning like white Americans to leave the States altogether. Literary critic Malcolm Cowley states, life in America was joyless and colorless, universally standardized, cowardly, uncreative, given over to the worship of wealth and machinery. This sentence is fairly loaded. First, we see expats and see that they understand the hypocrisy and I am like losing my words here. Hypocrisy and repression that people are enduring in America. Second, hard labor that accompanies the rising capitalist society's ethics foster a sense of conformity, which is typically not the box that an artist wants to fit in. So that's kind of a big deal. Some people fled America to just work, particularly writers, because people were very interested in what was happening in Europe. So people were going over there to work for American newspapers and magazines, but report on what was happening in Europe, such as the case with Hemingway. That's when he went over, was as a freelance writer in 1924. I have a video from Paris, and it has to be digitally remastered or something because it is in color. I chose this video because I think it paints a really good picture of the world Hemingway was writing in. Taken the style, the surroundings, even the demeanor of the people. And I'm going to have another video at the end of this that is more New Orleans centered. And I always think it's interesting contrast, like how people look here and there in the 1920s. So I don't know if you want to pay attention to that. Here is, oh, well, let me reshare my screen. Sorry about this. If I put it in the slideshow, it will be too large for me to upload. Here we go. I really liked this video because it was interesting to see how people reacted to the camera. You could see the woman was just kind of, in her own world, and then she sees the camera and she kind of smiles. The gentleman who kisses his lady's arm sees the camera and then he like goes in for more and with this little smirk on his face. And it was just interesting. But I also feel like, man, the glamour, this is just there every day. And that is what I find most fascinating when we look back at like the golden age in the 1920s, 30s. Everybody just looks so decadent and lavish and glorious. And I wonder if, in 100 years, are people going to look back at how we dress and style our hair and do our makeup and think, oh my goodness, they were so glamorous back in the day? I honestly, I don't think that's the case, but I mean, we shall see, right? Um, even how I know when I'm on an airplane, I'm in leggings, a hoodie, flip-flops. I am going for comfort, and that is it. And I know in my grandmother's day, they were very much, if you were going on a plane, it was an experience. You were dressed to the nines. Like you had on your best jewelry and your best outfits, and you were ready for an event, and that is just not the case anymore. And I don't know where that got lost in translation, but I don't, maybe it's with the commodification of flying and everybody kind of does it. So who knows? You just don't see people dressed up like that anymore. And if you do, you assume that they're on a business trip or something. Kind of before we leave the expatriate world, I wanted to talk about Josephine Baker. Um, she was born, where was she born? In Missouri. So St. Louis, Missouri, and she moved to France in the 1920s, where she became one of Europe's most popular and top paid performers. She was incredibly risque. And at a show in Paris, she performed with only a feather skirt on. And so even in this picture here, you can see like this kind of fishnetty type top. I don't know that it's see-through, but after looking into her, it would not surprise me if it was. Um, in the late 1930s, she came home to perform Ziegfeld Follies, which is one of her songs, hoping to establish an American audience. Unfortunately, America was not really ready for Miss Baker. She was met with hostile racist actions and quickly returned home to France. When she did return back in France, she obtained her French citizenship. When World War II broke out, Baker worked for the French resistance, smuggling messages while entertaining the troops. For her efforts, she was actually awarded both the Croix de Guerre, I'm probably butchering that, so I apologize, and the Legion of Honor with Rosette of Resistance. Those are two of France's highest military honors. So she's literally a French war hero. And I know none of that really has a whole lot to do with her music, but it is something I did not know while I was researching this project, and it is something that I feel is worth knowing, so I wanted to share that with you. I also have a video just a little bit on her background, so we're going to watch that, and I'm going to switch my screen again. Thanks in advance for your patience. All right. This is a great conference. So I really like that video because I do feel like it kind of shows the complexity of women. She was an exotic performer. She was very sexualized and she was also a war hero. How cool is that, right? Um, I'm gonna leave you as promised in New Orleans. Since a big chunk of our musicians were actually from Louisiana, I figured it would be cool to see the environment that they were surrounded in at the time. Aside from that, they probably all had a gig on Frenchman Street at one point or another. If you've ever been to New Orleans, it is flooded with music all the time. I've never been there. I mean, I don't stay out till like 4 in the morning, but I've never been there when it wasn't bustling. Um, New Orleans is one of my favorite cities in the world. If you haven't been there, I would 10 out of 10 suggest it. And just an FYI, the artist of the video is kind of called, I think it's something like Obscure New Orleans Song, but the artist that performs it is Hoagie Carmichael and his orchestra. And I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. Again, like I said, kind of check out the sitch with the demeanor of people, see if you can find a difference as far as how they are in comparison to the French community and what our, structures look like, everything like that. I don't want to chat. Here I am getting lost. So, interesting to me, just a couple of things that I noticed for this was what we choose to film. So, people in Paris were filming more leisure activities. They were sitting around, they were watching bands, they were having lunch or dinner. And the American film is very much the hustle and bustle. People are shopping, consumerism, people are working. Also, the dress. Everybody looked very glamorous in France, as where everybody still looks a lot nicer that, walking around local grocery store than we would probably, than I do for sure in today's standards. I'm not dressed up in my Sunday best to go to Target, and everybody here still looks very nice, but they have more of the worker aesthetic. There was literally a point in that video where they're filming women doing laundry. And you can't tell me that women in France were not doing laundry, but that's not what they chose to highlight in their reel. So it's just kind of interesting, those contrast of how we were living, how they were living, what we prioritized, what they prioritized, and kind of gives us an insight to why there was such a big move to go there, people that could go there. With that, I believe that's all for me. I hope that you all enjoyed the presentation. Here is my works cited, if my curtain goes. So feel free to pause it, screenshot it, whatever, if you are interested in any of my sources. Here is another works cited page. And I'm really interested to have this discussion about Hemingway and about The Sun Also Rises on Monday. I can't wait to see you all. We have. All right. Have a great week.